Hey, fourth grade, it's time for chapter 16 in the Aurora County All-Stars. Last chapter left off with quite a cliffhanger. There is someone on the couch in Mr. Norwood Boyd's house, and then it just ended. So hopefully in this chapter we get to find out what's going on. Chapter 16 starts with a quote by Mickey Mantle, the center fielder of the New York Yankees. I hated to bat against Drysdale. After he hit you, he'd come around, look at the bruise on your arm, and say, "Do you want me to sign it?" Here we go. House dropped the book and the flashlight. They clattered to the floor like tiny firecrackers exploding in a shower of light. Eudora yelped and plastered herself to the rug. House tried to run, but his legs were rubber. He willed his heart to keep beating. Bathed in the moonlight coming through the tall front windows, the body rising from the couch was no more than a soft shadow. And its voice, it turned out, was a whisper. House? Clebo! The blood rushed back to House's head along with his breath. In 2 seconds, he was on top of Clebo, throttling him like he was wrestling a chicken to the ground to cut off its head. You! Clebo's body went soft like a floppy doll, but still, House couldn't stop pummeling his friend. Clebo began to cry. I thought you was a ghost! House shook Clebo by the shoulders and shouted at him. What are you doing here? Clebo cried harder. Stop it, House! House released his friend and Clebo mopped at his face. I told my mom I was spending the night with you, he sobbed. I snuck in here hours ago, got scared, climbed up on this old couch, must have fell asleep. Next thing I know, I hear... Clebo hiccuped a huge breath and kept going. Something in this room. I knew it was a ghost. I knew it. I was a goner for sure. House shoved Clebo back into the couch. You sleep like the dead, Clebo, he said. He tried to keep the shake out of his voice. I've been here for ages. Clebo wiped at his eyes while he cried some more. All I wanted to find was a treasure, just like you. There ain't no treasure, Clebo. Clebo's face wore the look of a little boy who'd just been told there were no more ice pops in the freezer. You already looked? House did not hesitate. No. Yes. Clebo sniffed through his tears and tried to stop crying. He wiped his nose with his t-shirt. You ain't gonna tell nobody I cried, are you? House's anger fizzled as his fear dissolved. The room was quiet again. He watched a spider skittle away from the cone of yellow light on the floor. Eudora Welty trembled next to the couch. Swear you won't tell. Clebo scrambled to his feet in the soft dark and stepped into place, side to side, toe to toe, hugging himself. House picked up the flashlight and played it across the floor until he found leaves of grass. He picked it up with one hand while he gave Eudora a slow stroke with the other. The dog snuffled a sigh and closed her eyes. I'm dying here, House, said Clebo. Swear you won't tell. House slumped into an armchair and settled into it like he was an old bag of beans filling in all the crevices. He switched off the light. The room lost any yellow light it had possessed. The far walls of books shimmered in a dim, silvery glow from beyond the windows where the world was stretching out in the darkness to nowhere, never ending. Be still, House commanded. Clebo stood as still as a stick. House's insides were full to bursting. He'd held his secrets inside for such a long time. He looked at Clebo's desperate face and made a decision. I'll tell you something I won't tell anybody else, he said. And if you don't tell, I won't tell anybody about you crying. Clebo sank back on the couch with a grateful thump. Done, he said wearily, relief spreading over him like soft butter on hot toast. It's a deal. And so, enveloped in the light from the morning moon, House unburdened himself to his friend. He told him what he'd been doing every afternoon for almost a year. He told him everything but the story of finding Mr. Norwood Boyd on his deathbed. He hadn't been able to tell his father about it, and now he found he couldn't tell Clebo either. The very act of dying was so precious, so private, and truth to tell, a part of House wondered if he had somehow been summoned to keep watch with Norwood Boyd as the angels came to take him to heaven, in the same way he'd watched the angels come for his mother 6 years ago. Surely those who were summoned to attend the dying were charged with holding that moment sacred. He would keep it to himself. He would keep his note to himself as well. But everything else, the whole year of coming and coming to Mr. Norwood Boyd's house, and of reading and reading book after book, he shared this story. Why didn't you tell me you were coming over here every day? I could have come with you. Clebo wore his disappointment like his wrinkled clothes, slopping all over the place. I didn't tell anybody, Clebo, but I'm your best friend. I didn't even think to ask. What did he look like? He was old and wrinkled, like Pip. Was he always in bed? When I got here, he was. Did he talk? Sure he talked. What did he say? Not a lot. How are you, House? Thanks for coming, House. He stopped himself as he remembered. What? House bit his lip. What was the last thing he said to you? House heard it. The morning that he had been summoned by Eudora Welty, the last time he had sat next to the rosewood bed, Mr. Norwood had closed his eyes and spoken his last words on this earth. I have enjoyed your company, House. House swallowed around a lump in his throat. I don't remember, he told Clebo. Can I see his room? Can I see where he died? No. Did you check the freezer for babies? Stop it. I read 17 books cover to cover while you were having fun catching pop flies and running the bases. And I can tell you, Mr. Norwood Boyd isn't a circus sideshow. He's a person. Or he was. Why did he shut himself up in this house all these years? I don't know. I didn't ask him. The guys ain't never gonna believe you did this. You ain't gonna tell him. Oh, right. Clebo scratched his head. Why not? They believe those stories about babies and ghosts and killings, and they'll call me as crazy as they called Norwood Boyd. Well, I feel sorry for you, said Clebo. Why would your daddy want to punish you like that? You couldn't play ball, but you could have come and watched. House shook his head. Watching's like torture when you can't play. And besides, Mr. Norwood? House hesitated. What? House's face flushed. He was a friend of the family. Clebo's eyes bugged wide. How so? I don't know. House was not willing to go further. That's what my dad said. Wonder what's his connection to Francis. I can tell you that, said House, if you're brave enough to walk into that hallway. That's the end of chapter 16. It was Clebo on the couch. What a surprise. 4th grade, this chapter was kind of a big deal. House is a very quiet character. We've known that from the beginning. He doesn't say a whole lot. He doesn't share a whole lot. He really is trusting Clebo in this moment by sharing all that's been going on for over a year. The fact that House didn't tell anyone about this, and now he's sharing it with Clebo, just feels really big for his character to do something like that. And Clebo's just worried about people finding out that he was scared and crying. But I wonder how it feels for House to let go of something like that he's been holding in for such a long time. Think about a time where you've held on to something that's hard to talk about, and then you've decided to share with someone. Think about how that feels. You might be able to relate to House in this chapter. Okay, 4th grade, we'll see you tomorrow for the next chapter. Bye.